Hey everyone, Georgie here with the Ukraine Matters, and we're gonna get to the map update in just a second. But I gotta start with talking about Vuhledar because I am out of words actually. I don't even know what to say because in the last couple of months I've been from here and there talking about hey, we should not underestimate the Russian military. Yes, their military is shit and they are complete orcs and they don't know how to properly fight, and they have troubles adapting the situation on the fly. If they have an order, then they will execute the order as given. And that's the problem, inherited problem of the Russian military. But I was still doing a mistake of assuming that they would actually learn. But the more and more we find out about the situation in the Vuhledar area, where day after day they send the columns of vehicles just like they did in the start of the war in the 24th February. So when people said the Russian offensive is being readied and we're going to see a big Russian offensive, and someone says like, oh, we're going to see the repeat of the 24th February, essentially last year. This is not what I had in mind. I was not expecting that we're going to be seeing again columns of vehicles full of troops, armor, everything just going in a straight line along the road, hitting every single mine and trap and every single precise artillery shell that's being thrown at them. It is crazy for me that this is still happening. Oh my god, I cannot believe I'm taking the L here, guys. I told you that the Russian army is shit, but they might adapt. I am really seriously doubting that they can adapt anything because in Vuhledar they just showed just how absolutely fucking incompetent they are with, like, because even if you have a large army, you still need to know how to use the army. If you just throw them all to mines, that doesn't make any sense. Who cares how much it is? Obviously this is good news for Ukraine because they're fighting complete morons, but Jesus Christ. All right, let's get to the map update. So we start obviously discussing with Vuhledar, as where I did at the start right here. And Vuhledar direction, well, I'm actually going to just show the satellite images that you might see here. And these satellite images basically represent this whole situation that is happening around Vuhledar. So on this first image here, you see the diagonal line that kind of crosses this whole image. This is the highway that goes towards south. So down is south. And then the top part, this is where Vuhledar is. This is like where the Ukrainians are holding their positions. And this is where the high-rise buildings are essentially in this area. So it's the observation points. We saw these buildings being hit by the artillery, Russian artillery and the TOS launchers when we were just discussing the start of the Russian offensive. And then you see that big black part on the right side of the image. Well, those are where essentially the snow has melted and now we see essentially impact points where the artillery was struck. You know why it's all black? Because this is where, when the Russians started their attack on Vuhledar, this is the part where they entered the city. So they entered the city and then they got completely shelled the hell back out of it. So this is what it looked like for the Russians to be in that area. They just got completely obliterated and kicked out of that area. Then I also told you that on the map, if I imagine show you right now on the map, this is the same diagonal that I just showed you. So from this diagonal, the Russians were forced back first this south way, and then they go back towards the eastern part. They were pushed back. So they decided to change tactics and said, okay, maybe we cannot attack Vuhledar directly. Let's try to kind of, flank it and maybe go here, and then maybe we can cut off the reinforcements for Vuhledar, and then we kind of attack here and do from the north side. And we see here that there are like these green zones on the map. And these are the tree belt areas. And like whenever you see the latest videos of Vuhledar, they're coming from these areas where those tree belts are. And now I'm going to show you the second picture of the recent satellite that we have. On this picture, we see a little bit further below, but I want to draw your attention towards the right side where we actually have essentially the map overlaying with the images. And you see that on that right side, these vertical lines, the tree belt areas, are completely covered in the same black impact spots as the Vuhledar area itself. This is where the Russians are getting their faces caved in, and just by the kind of imagining the scale of it, this is just what we had by the 10th of February. The Russians have not been stopping since then. They are continuing doing their, I don't even know how to call them, but I mean, I already ranted about this at the start of the video, but basically, Russians have learned nothing. Nothing. They have absolutely no idea what are they doing. They're just saying, okay, we have a map, I'm gonna draw an arrow on the map, and now I want men and armor go straight down that arrow and follow the order as much as you can. Obviously, besides that, it's really good news. What about the other parts of the front? Well, the situation actually is okay. I know it's very shaky. Okay, because what we hear the reports are on the front line is that Russians are really trying to. Remember, their goal is this is the initial wave of the offensive that they started. They have still plenty of reserves, they have still plenty of troops, but they needed some kind of weak points where they would trying to hit the Ukrainian army and then develop from this. I've told you countless times this is how their doctrine works, and we've seen this countless time already happening as well, such as towns with Popasna and other places. Moreover, if we go to the Bakhmut area, the situation it's stabilized somehow, because I told you that Russians were already fighting for the road. We now get reports that Ukrainians actually pushed the Russians back from the road. The Russians were trying to attack Ivanivske. They were pushed back from Ivanivske. Now, this does not mean that it's going to be a permanent position. Everything is a subject to change. But good news is that there is some pushback from Ukrainians. And it seems that at least this wave of the Russian attacks is a little bit dying down on the southern side. It's not going to die down like that. It's going to be calm. Obviously, the attacks continue in the same passion like going forward, but at least Ukrainians are able to hit back with the same amount of force as well. I was really worried about this area of which was to the west of Blahodatne, where I said that the Russians would like to exploit this weak point. But Ukrainians realized it quite well, and I've heard that the additional reinforcements have been sent in the area, and Russians were pushed back also from the M03 road, which is running here. The difficult situation is right now in Paraskoviivka. It's been pushed into the south, so that's unfortunate. This obviously undermines also Krasna Hora, the defensive position. So again, on the Bakhmut, just to kind of quickly underscore, there are two key points that we're looking for. First, the Paraskoviivka and this road to essentially be overtaken by Russians, and on the south, Ivanivske to be overtaken by Russians. Once either of those happen, the situation will become really, really difficult. At that moment, Ukrainians should start considering pulling out, and we know that the plans are in place, though they're still defending Bakhmut. And the second part, if both Ivanivske and Paraskoviivka fall, then the situation in Bakhmut will be pretty, pretty bad. However, just to kind of reassure you, Bakhmut's situation, how it looks right now, this essentially semi-encirclement, just to kind of like do simple thoughts, it looks about the same as Avdiivka's situation has been looking for quite a while now. And Avdiivka has been standing there since forever. So as much as Bakhmut's situation is being considered as difficult and Russians are slowly encroaching to kind of overcome that, it is still, when you compare it to something like Avdiivka, which held for so long, then the situation doesn't really look that great, that awful. Same as I've mentioned that Russians were trying to kind of move towards the north part, towards Siversk. There, unfortunately, they had no success. So it's again good. Ukrainians reportedly got reinforcements in the area, so Russian attacks are being stopped, and we are actually seeing now reports and videos from the area of actually Ukrainians taking over the Russian positions, which is again great. It's not a long-term positions because it's a moving how do you say moving fight. So there is just Russians are trying to attack, they have some kind of temporary positions, then Ukrainians counterattack, and then they show video of them overtaking the temporary positions from the Russians. So it's a push and pull there so far. And on the north side, we still hear that there is still some kind of tries to advance toward Dvorishna as is happening, but overall, the situation both there and around Kislivka stays, sorry, not Kislivka, but Novoselivsky, sorry, stays about the same. So on the front lines, we have mostly good news because for Ukraine, as being in a defensive positions, if their defensive positions are not being collapsed, it's good news, which is great. And I'm going to talk more about the situation on the front lines in the second part. But before I continue, please hit the like, subscribe, and share of this video button. It really helps because we need to show the support for Ukraine and get a message about Ukraine out there. Otherwise, we're going to leave the whole space for the propaganda channels. Let's not allow them and promote good coverage. And I'm going to continue the idea that I just discussed, that Ukrainians are having additional support sent to them around the Kremina line, around the Liman area, and so on. You've maybe seen some of those videos that I'm showing you right now. And people have been asking, well, what is this? What are we really looking? Well, what you're looking, I've been discussing this quite a lot. And this is essentially the elements of the second army that Ukraine had. We were talking about that Ukraine has actually some fresh troops that it's gathering up to deploy if necessary to either help defend, or what Ukraine wants the most is to have these fresh equipped troops to then basically send and overtake Russian positions later in the spring. Now, I don't know military tactics as much. Again, I'm basing my knowledge mostly on other war professionals and analysts that have proven themselves quite accurate in their predictions and very trustworthy. Hence, my just information sharing so far has been very much to the point. But we've seen here some of these elements now being deployed. Now, it's obviously not a lot. We don't see a lot of the heavy equipment here. We mostly see like the APCs, which are essentially armored taxis for the battlefield. So something that can help supplement some of the existing troops, maybe rotate them out to help Ukraine sustain. But at least judging by the videos, this is not yet enough to form any kind of large-scale offensive. We don't see massive columns moving out everywhere, though maybe it's not a Ukrainian tactics. Again, I'm assuming here. But overall, this is just to prove the point that I was making during the last whole month and going forward when we're discussing that Ukraine just needs to survive this Russian offensive so then it can go on their own counteroffensive. And people also ask, well, where is the Ukrainian army? Why does the Russian always pushing? Well, Ukrainian army is there. They are preparing. They are having fresh forces to then hit back the Russians when they are not expecting it. And those videos are showing this. And finally, let's talk something that I really wanted to kind of cover, which is Zelensky's visit to European Union, United Kingdom, and visiting some other countries. This was obviously the visit where Zelensky's aim was to push for more support for Ukraine, which is really great. And obviously, I think like there are some countries that would really like to be in the, I don't know, in the cloud. They would like to get more clout from Zelensky. I think there was some kind of politician that got really, I wouldn't say jealous. It's not really a thing, but they got really a bit upset that Zelensky went to United States in person, but he didn't go to the European Union members. And especially it was really noticeable when how happy, for example, Macron was when Zelensky came to visit him, which is really nice to see. I'm a very big optimist towards the future of Europe that both Ukraine is going to have in Europe and what the European politics will have with Zelensky. But what we need to keep in mind is that we are still very, very messy. Now, Europe, compared to the war efforts, is moving super slow. Like, we are not delivering nearly enough for Ukraine, so it matters. We've discussed that Ukraine is going to. I've titled my video on tanks is Ukraine drowning in tanks, and it's to the large extent has been mostly true. Right now, as far as I am aware, we're discussing the delivery in total of both Russian and maybe older like Leopard 1 tanks and so on. It will be totaling somewhere closer to 500 tanks, which is a pretty good number. That's a pretty significant increase of the Ukrainian capabilities. But what I'm still hoping to see, and this is something that I really hope our politicians understand, is we still hear that we need to preserve the majority of the militaries on our continent so that our militaries are battle capable, so that we are ready to fight the war. And my only question to that is, war with who exactly? Because if Ukraine defeats Russia, then there will be no war. Like, Ukraine defeating Russia is the precondition to us to have less wars in the future and less threats on the European continent, especially because right now there's only two countries that threaten European continent. It is Belarus and Russia. And those two countries are right now heavily engaged. Belarus, by not obviously using their own force, but they're using their equipment to support Russian invasion. Russia is using their mobilization. So it's essential for the defense and protection of every single European country to help and invest into Ukrainians' capabilities to defend themselves. I find it extremely frustrating that instead of actually delivering more and more support, but the modern support, right? We were talking Leopard 2 tanks, 2A6, and so on, and we're still discussing a lot of that. A lot of those discussions need to die. We just need to focus on what should be done. One of 5 Leopards, I made in my last video a discussion about the fact that they will be not as shit as people say, just because the situation on the battlefield, they will do a lot of good job. And that's all true. But Ukraine needs also more modern and powerful weapons. Ukraine needs to defend Europe. Ukraine needs to make me, like me sitting here at home, more protected. The fact that we're holding back on delivering certain weapons or categories of weapons or anything else just makes no sense. The longer this drags on, the more exposed to threats we are as Europeans. What we should do is we need to be aware of that. This is also when politicians say that's like, yeah, but will we this, will we that? There is no will we this, will we that. Right now, the only threat to Europe that exists and can threaten the militaries, which, to be honest, let me just make a side note here. It's like, there has been an active large-scale war on the European continent. And if a year into this war, you still have no fucking idea how many tanks do you have and how many of them are operational, what the fuck have you been doing? So, message to all Europeans and European politicians especially, get your shit together and support Ukraine. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope to see you guys next time. Slava Ukraini!